Hello, it's Lisa from Felt Eclectic. Today I'm going to introduce you to my beginner needle felting kit and some of the basic techniques used to create the shapes used in needle felting. So let's open it up and take a look. Inside you will find 15 colors of wool plus 2 extras of white wool. You will have a straw here that has 2 needles in it. One of them is a fine needle and the other is a medium needle. You can tell them apart by the red is going to be on the end of the medium needle. Needles are extremely sharp. You need to be very careful as you're felting so that you do not poke your skin. They will penetrate skin very easily. It is not fun. I'm just going to set them aside and I'll tell a little bit more about the safety of the needles after. We have a skewer. A skewer is used to create some of the long limbs. Here's a project that I've done in the past that I would have used the skewer to make these long skinny limbs. We've got 2 pipe cleaners. I use the pipe cleaners to make armatures. Armatures are basically like a simple skeleton of a person or an animal. Here are 2 examples. This little dog shape is made out of 1 pipe cleaner where you just twist it into the shape that you want. And here is a basic bird or duck armature. I used 2 of the pipe cleaners to make this one. There are lots of pictures and videos online to show how to make armatures. The armatures are great because then if you want to have some flexibility in your final project to be able to maneuver it and reposition, it will give it a nice bendability and stability. You will also have a felting surface. The felting surface is so that as you are stabbing through the wool, your needle won't break when it hits something on the other side. Today I will use a much larger felting surface just for the sake of the tutorial, but this is more than adequate for any project that you're going to use with the wool in this kit. So the type of wool that's in this kit is called Maori wool. It's from New Zealand. It is excellent for needle felting because it is very curly. It is a short fiber bat in that when you pull it apart, each individual fiber isn't very long and it likes to stick to itself. You might have seen some beautiful merino wool in the past where it's long and silky and has it's all just flowing in one direction. Merino wool is great for wet felting and certain other projects, maybe even the top coat of an animal that you create after you've had the nice base and nice and firm. Short fiber is much easier to work with if you're needle felting. So let's get started. I'm just going to use this yellow today so that it shows up on the video. So I already showed a little bit of this little guy. Here's another similar shaped one. They both have similar head shapes, similar body shapes, similar limbs. The only real difference on them is their ears are clearly different sizes, and just you can see by switching something up as simple as that how you can go from a bunny to a bear. Another project I've done in the past is this cute little bird. Again, everything in the world is made up of simple shapes. If you can see the simple shape that it's made of, you'll be able to break it down into the shapes that you can make out of wool and then create it yourself. Another cute project for a beginner is these little pumpkins, and there are many felters online who have done tutorials on these. If you want an in-depth tutorial on a pumpkin, go ahead, Google that up, look that up. They're so simple. I love how cute they turn out. It doesn't have to be symmetrical even. It doesn't have to turn out perfectly for these pumpkins to be adorable. Finally, another simple project is this narwhal I made probably about 10 years ago. Just a nice wedge shape, adding on some fins. In his tusk, I used a pipe cleaner, and that gives it a nice, it keeps its shape, and it's also able to be nice and thin. So let's get started with making some of our first basic shapes. So take out your wool and you're going to unravel it. I've just rolled it up so that it looks nice in the box, but in order to be workable, we want to be able to have it unrolled. You may notice that there is some what's called vegetable matter in your wool. Sometimes that just happens. These sheep lived outside. The machines do their best to get rid of it, but sometimes there's some in there, so just go ahead and pick it out. So what you want to do is you want to just unravel the wool and lay it out. First, we're going to make a simple ball shape. And you take off how much wool depending on how big you want your final ball to be. We'll just work in small shapes today. So the key to successful needle felting is to get rid of as much air from your project as you can before you even start poking with your needle. If I just bunched this up and started felting, I could get eventually a ball shape that I wanted, but it will take a very long time. I will likely get bored and discouraged. So what we want to do is, using our felting surface, push our wool down into the felting surface and start rolling it up, pushing the wool together so that there is less air in between each fiber. So I'm just rolling it up, tucking it in on the sides, rolling it, just keeping it in the shape of a ball. Just keep going until all of those little final fibers have been dealt with. Okay, so now I'm going to hold it onto my felting surface. I'm going to start with my needle. As I said before, please be very careful with the needles. We want to be aware of where our fingers are at all times when we're felting. Felting is a good thing, activity for listening to an audiobook or chatting with a friend, but not watching TV or anything where you're looking away. So you want to be able to stab your needle into your project and out at the same angle. I can go from any side in and out as long as I draw it out at the same angle as I stabbed it into. So I'm going to just work around my ball, keeping it moving. I like to think of wool as I would explain it like Play-Doh. Any direction that you push the wool, that's the direction that the wool will go into. If you push a piece of Play-Doh into a certain direction, that's the way that you need to stab it in order to get the shape that you want. So I'm just keeping on rolling my ball because since it's a sphere, I need to stab evenly on all sides. So you already can see I'm not pushing it into the felting surface nearly as much. It's holding its shape really well. It's already a ball shape. It has not as much give in it as my, my loose mound that I had originally showed. The firmer your base, the more success you're going to have in your felting, so that when you go to add your limbs and things on, so you can see how firm his body is, then your limbs are going to stick on. If it's too loose, everything will collapse in on itself. It will not attach well. I might be able to show an example of that in a little bit here. So with a sphere, you can just make these cute little balls, and then you could string them on a string and have a cute garland. You can use it as a head shape, all sorts of things. Just roll it in my hands. So this is not too bad. If you were going to give this as a toy for a child, you would probably need to felt it for much longer. If this was for a garland string, this is plenty. I'm just going to set that aside for now. Now we're going to move on to a basic cylinder shape. So I'm going to rip off some more wool. And again, I'm going to move the wool in the direction I want and in the shape that I want. Just starting to push it down into the felting surface. I'm going to fold the ends in so they're not dealing with a lot of this extra fluff on the edges. And you would need to take off as much wool as you want for the end, how big you want the end of your project to be. So now I'm just going to go up and down the edge to keep it in place. And you can already see that it's a cylinder shape. If I want the end of this cylinder to be flattened, I'm going to hold it onto my felting surface, and I'm going to, as I said, if this was Play-Doh, I'd push it down. So what I need to do with my needle is push it down to flatten it out. I'm not poking in very deep. The barbs only go up about this far on the needle, so I don't even need to go in that deep. I can go in halfway. That way it keeps it away from my fingers. So you can see that it's flattening it out. I'll turn it over and flatten out the other end. So there we go. We have a cylinder that is lightly felted, but showing you how to flatten out each end. Now I'm going to set it aside, even though it's not felted enough, and I'm going to show you how to make a limb and show you how to then attach it, and the difference between trying to attach a limb to something that's very lightly felted versus something that is more firmly felted. So just take some of your wool, take your skewer. You're going to start with a small amount on the end, and you're going to wrap it around tightly around the skewer. As soon as I have it wrapped a few times, I'm going to actually not wrap the wool, and I'm going to spin the skewer instead. And I'm going to hold it in a long, thin, it's long and thin, as opposed to twisting it. If I go up and down, I'm just going to show you what it looks like to twist it in a minute, and I'm keeping it nice and thin. If I was to then try and twist it around, it starts looking more like yarn being wound, and that's not going to felt together. So I'm going to unwind that and keep it nice and thin. I can pull it out a little bit and just wrapping it by either wrapping the wool and keeping it thin or twisting the skewer. Now if I wanted to have it all the same thickness on the limb, I would just go back and forth over the whole thing, the same amount. If I wanted to have the wool thicker on one end, you would just concentrate the wool on one end. So I'm just spinning it in my hand. You can already see it's dense. The only air that's going to really be in there is where the skewer is. So now I'm going to hold it onto my felting surface and I'm going to push it off. If I tried to pull the skewer out, it often will just pull some of your wool apart. So here it's already staying in position and in its shape fairly well. Just going to lightly go over all the sides. I'm going to go into the end to kind of neaten that up, round it out. And I'm leaving this end a little bit fuzzier. That's so that I can attach it to my next piece of my project. So I'm going to rub it in my hands a little, and that kind of neatens it up. So again, if this was for a final project, I would have felt this for longer. So I'm going to show you what it looks like to try and felt into something that's not dense and then something that is a little more dense. So if I'm going to attach this limb, I'm going to stab that fluffy end into the project, and you can see that it's collapsing in on itself. That I'm going to stab it for approximately that long just to show you, and I'm going to pull it apart, and it easily comes apart. Now I'm going to try it on the same thing, but with the ball that has been felted a little bit more, not a lot more, but still just to show you that it actually does make a difference. Okay, so now I'm pulling it. You can see it's starting to come apart, but it took a lot more effort. When there is something that's been felted well, like this guy, it actually didn't come off. If I was really wrenching on it, I'm sure it would. So let's just add that just for fun. We aren't making an actual project today. I'm just showing you all of the basics of needle felting. Okay, so if I then wanted to make some of the flat shapes, something like an ear or the tail feathers or eyelids, I would then take a small amount of the wool. I'm just going to pull it apart and stack it so it's a little bit thicker. I'm going to lay it in front of me. I'm going to mark the center by just having the needle go a little bit through the wool and a little bit into the surface of the felting pad below. Now let's say I'm going to make a cat ear, which is triangular. I'm then going to draw out my triangle shape by going through the wool and into the felting surface. And I'm going to then fold over, and you can feel it. It tugs and it will go on a nice shape, nice line of where I felted. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side where the other line was felted into the foam. And now I have a nice triangle with nice edges and nice lines. I'm going to felt a little bit. I'm not poking the needle very far into the foam because that's just going to bury the wool into the foam that you're going to have to pull out later. So I did that a little bit on that side. Let's pick it up off of the felting surface, flip it over, and evenly felt on the other side as well. Just trying to get some of those strays from the edge and felting them into the ear. And you can do it on both sides a few times. Now you can hear that I'm almost not hitting the foam at all. It's just going right into the ear shape itself. Okay, so if I wanted to add another color on top, I would just grab whatever color it is. And I'm just gonna fold it into basically the shape that I want. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm gonna lay it on, and I'm going to very lightly felt it onto the surface of my ear shape. In this case, I'm making, you know, that secondary skin color that's inside of a cat's ear. I'm not poking super deep. I'm not going all the way through down into the foam because that will just make all of the green come up through the backside of the ear, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of green on the backside. You're just wanting to felt it into the front. Okay, so once you have done that and we've left this bottom edge all fluffy, just like we did with the limb, then that is going to be used to attach it onto our head, tail, body, whatever part you're felting. So we could easily just add it on like this. You can pinch it at the bottom and then add it on. You can just manipulate the wool into the direction and size that you want it. So let's just hold it on, start felting it onto the head shape. Just felting all of that extra fluff into the base. So this is now almost attached. And because we have left that fluff, it incorporates seamlessly. It looks just great. And now we've got a one-armed, one-eared something. Okay, so let's try adding an eye. One way to add an eye is to make an indentation in your head. By pushing the needle all in one area, I'm going to indent an eye socket. By indenting the eye socket, we can then add an eyeball that's actually spherical, which then gives it a bit more realism. So as you can see where I'm felting in this one area, the wool is being indented in that area. So that's not very deep at this point, but that's where we'll leave it. And I will grab some white for an eyeball. So I've got just a very small amount of white, and I'm just going to roll it in my hands and get it into the shape that I want. As soon as you are starting to work with something so tiny as this, it's very difficult to needle felt it onto itself without disappearing into the foam or getting your fingers in the way. So I'm just kind of using my hands, and then I'm just going to hold it into place inside that eye socket. And instead of going into the middle of the eye, I'm working my way around the outside to attach it. If I felted just on the top, that would flatten out my eyeball and get rid of the spherical dome shape that we are looking for. Just working my way all the way around, and that way it's completely attached, but still maintains the eyeball shape. Now, clearly that doesn't look very eyeballish at this point. I'll add a tiny little pupil with just the tiniest amount of black. Just going to get some of those extra ends and just felting it into the one spot. It distorted a little bit my ball shape, so I'm just going to go around my eyeball again. Okay, so I'm going to set it aside, and I'll show you how to do an eyelid. Pull off a small amount of your wool again. Just stack it up to make it a little bit thicker. And now I'm going to go across my wool. And I'm going to fold it down. And I'm going to go down about 1/2 centimeter, felting another line. And I'm going to fold it up. Now I'm going to hold the fluff out of the way, and we're going to keep the fluff there so that we can add the eyelid to the head shape in a little bit and be able to incorporate it. I'm just going to lightly go across this shape for a little while. I'm going to lift it up and flip it over and felt. Now, right now, if I started to add this on, you'd see that there's this very fuzzy edge. You have two options. One, you can hold it in your hand and very carefully just rubbing the needle on the edge, and that will help get rid of some of those edge fluffs. Another option is if you got a piece of cardboard, like thin cereal box cardboard, and folded it in half, and then in between your hand and the felting wool would be this piece of cardboard, so then you can hold it with the cardboard. I've done both before. So I'm just rubbing the needle on the edge, trying to get rid of some of those extra fuzzy wool parts. So you can see that that helped with a lot of that extra. So now I'm just going to pull a little bit of that fluff off, and now I can add something like an eyelid to my strange guy that I'm making. I'm going to stab all of that extra fluff in again. And by having the fluff, it seamlessly incorporates and makes it look like you've just made it all in one piece. Now, often when you add eyelids, your creature will, or animal will look sad. The way to change that is to then just change where the eyelid goes, how open the eye is, the angle that the eyelid is going for. You can add another bottom one as well. So there you go, a little eyelid on him. So another way to make the eyes, as I've shown on this cute little bird, is you can just have the shape directly onto the surface of whatever your base was. This gives a just cute little cartoony look, and the only way that you can fail in this is if your surface isn't firm enough. You need to be able to have it firm enough, otherwise I'll demonstrate on my unfelted cylinder here. If I had, pulling off another piece of white for my eyeball, if I have a piece of like an eye that I'm going to put on, or a flower that I'm trying to felt onto something, and I'm trying to felt this on, it just starts disappearing into my surface of my base. It distorts the shape of my base. It's now like more like a boat shape almost. It doesn't maintain the integrity of your base shape. It's super important to have a firm foundation for anything that you're felting. Okay, so if I was to add lines to something, let's say we're going to put a line across the back of this guy. I am going to pull a small amount of wool. I'm going to hold it down on my felting, my base, and I'm going to just felt it in a line. I have an end that's fluffy. You can either pull it off or you can pull it back on itself, and now felt that into the line that you wanted as well. Lines are good for like drawing branches on something, for different kinds of lines on different kinds of animals like a tiger. I'm just going to hold it firmly and pull it off. Now I'll bring it back in on itself. So there you go, you've got a line, you've got an eyelid, you've got an eye, you've got a limb, you've got a flat ear. This goes over all of the basics of shapes and attaching them. The basics of attaching, again, is to make sure you have a fluffy edge that you leave to attach. You can also, if you haven't left enough, you can add a little bit more wool between the two pieces that you've just attached, and use that as a helper to help attach everything on as well. Incorporating. So that will help maintain the integrity and structure of what you have attached onto your main base. The longer you felt something too, the less of the fuzzies that you will have. It will be more smooth, like this guy. So one more thing I'll show you is how to wrap wool around an armature. So I'll just grab this guy and we'll just start and do part of his head and his neck. So we are going to have longer, thin pieces of wool. And so I've gotten a thin one. It's not very long, but if I just gently pull it along its length, I've now lengthened it out. I'm going to start by holding the wool on just like I did with the skewer and wrapping it a few times. Now, if I just loosely wrapped it, that will work, but again, this is going to take me a long time to felt this. Sorry, move it up. This is going to take me a long time to felt this. So let's back it off. And once we've got it established, we're going to hold it close to the project. We're going to wrap it again without twisting it and making it look like yarn. And we're going to wrap it tightly. And you can see the difference, how much tighter that is. I pretty much don't even need to felt that. It's so tight against the armature. And you're just going to build up the shapes that you want on top of sorry, I keep on moving it, on top of your armature wire. Now at this point, like I said, all of that wool is now incorporated. I don't even have to felt that. You can be very careful going up beside the wire so that you don't break your needle. And then you just keep adding wool on top, and then you've got the ability to change the shape of your needle felted creation. So I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, or me, and I hope that you have much success in your needle felting journey. Bye.